When I look at the slides of these young people, I think two things. I think they do really grow up, which has been some wisdom said to me over my parenting years from many of you. And I also see these strong young people, people who grew up in our midst, now going out into the world. So today is time to dole out some wisdom to them and to reflect together. At this time of year, wisdom is given out by everyone from Ellen DeGeneres to David Brooks to President Obama to Kanye West in the form of commencement speeches. They are commencing all over the place this month. Some are foolish ramblings and some are real. I love to read them, to take the pulse of what our nation is all about. One of my favorites over the years was a short address Steve Jobs made in 2005 to Stanford University graduates, which ended with 4 words: stay hungry, stay foolish. Here in church on this Sunday, we honor these graduating high school seniors and remind them that we are a home for them, and we remind them to be good representatives of us in the world. That in and of itself is a great and terrible truth. When I was 17 and graduating from high school, I couldn't even be a representative of myself. I was so unaware at 17 that lashing out or leaping before looking or talking before thinking was par for the course. I wasn't so much a wrecking ball for others than I was for my own life. Everyone else who was in the way took their chances. What I needed was wisdom. What I had was wise people all around me, but ears that couldn't hear so much of what was being said to me. What I needed was not commencement speeches, but the commencing of a life that had direction and purpose. That would come later for me. Later, I would hear the wisdom. I would get those whacks on the side of the head so that I would begin to wake up, so that I could make decisions about my life. I have a feeling that these youth here in the front row are better prepared to meet the world than I ever was. Either way, today's wisdom starts here. And it starts with the people in the world who are known as the Hadza people. Some years ago, a man named Eric Utney, the founder of the Utney Reader, lived with the Hadza people of Tanzania. These are the quote-unquote original people of the Rift Valley, with ancestors going back 30,000 years. He boiled down what he learned from living with them to 3 aspects of wisdom: withhold judgment, listen to your elders, and don't fear death. That's a good list. That's a religious list, if you ask me. Many of the lessons on that list are lessons we hear in church. Many of life's trials will yield these same lessons, and many of us never do any of them. Let me expand. Withhold judgment. Matthew chapter 7 says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." For the Jews of the time when these words were spoken, and for Jesus and his followers, judgment was for God alone, and to preempt God's judgment was human folly. So I say withhold judgment doesn't mean don't judge. It means don't judge right away, unless necessary. If an angry, crazed man is running down the street flashing a gun at you, do not withhold judgment. Run. But if you meet someone and they believe something you don't, or they see the world in a way you think might be a little nuts, but you might try and wait to judge whether you can open a conversation up with them, whether you can be part of this person's life, whether you can learn something from them. Most things are revealed slowly, especially human things. Most of us are pretty quick to judge, and it doesn't serve us. I was in an amazing conversation this week with my own genderqueer child and the teachers of Gio's school. They were way behind and even beginning to understand what a kid who resides between the gaps of binary gender expression can be. They were way behind where this church is. But to their credit, they did not judge this student they loved. They asked for clarity around language and pronouns and how best to be a support. Privately, they may have judged, but publicly, they were thoughtful. They were loving. They said, "We are learning in this conversation." A touching moment, a model for us all. In a world that tells us we should judge quickly, can we step back? Can we say that to occupy the center of a spectrum of any conversation, to ease off the pedal of judgment, is something worthy of who we are as spiritual people? I hope so. Withhold judgment, the Hadza people say. I say, do it slowly. Listen to your elders. I like this one because I am one of your elders. And if you're in this room and you're under 45, I am also one of your elders. And I like to listen to my elders. The fact is that no matter how old we get, we always have elders. Maybe not people who are older in years, but who are more mature than we are in areas of the soul, the heart, and the mind. Richard Nisbet of the University of Michigan found that people older than 60 were able to recognize that values differ. They could acknowledge uncertainties, and they could accept things changing over time better than those younger than 60. He said those elders were better at acknowledging another's point of view than someone under 60. I think Professor Nisbet is right. I also think that age can have little to do with wisdom. I have been taught bits of wisdom by 5-year-olds that 85-year-olds never learned. Listen to your elders means not only just accept what someone older than you says, but seek out the wisdom that can help you mature. Writer Annie Lamott says she learned some basic rules from her elders. One list in particular. Number 1, don't act like a pig. Number 2, don't cross the intersection right after the light turns green. Number 3, when all else fails, follow instructions. Some of us are still learning that one. Number 4, try to take a long walk every day and keep your eyes and ears open for birds, she says. Number 5, assume that all drivers on the road are ignorant of rules 1 and 2. Wisdom to live by. I say, remember that teachers come in all shapes and sizes, but it is true that teachers who have been teaching for 50 years are usually more wise than teachers who have been teaching for 2. Elders have a lot to say. And remember that talking to people who are just your own age is incredibly boring. Listen to your elders. Third, don't fear death. The wisdom of ages has had a lot to say on this topic. The late English singer and cartoonist George Melly said, "I don't fear death. I'm a fatalist, although I would rather death came as a shock to me." If you are 17 or 18, you probably don't fear death, and you probably don't know much about it either. When I was 17, I worked on an ambulance. I had people die in my arms. I got to know what death was pretty quickly. I learned it was final. something I was trying to avoid up until that point. I learned that it never gets easy and that it's natural. Now, we all know life ends. Some hope there is more to come after death. Some believe this is all we get. Some believe our habits live on. Some have no idea. I believe, like most Unitarians, that our deeds and our spirit here is what lives on in others, but I'm open to options for eternity. The wisdom literature of the Hindus say, "For that which is born, death is certain, and for the dead, birth is certain. Therefore grieve not over that which is unavoidable." Just knowing the inevitability of death doesn't mean you don't fear it. And it really doesn't mean that you don't grieve it. I think it takes a lot of work to confront death. The Tibetan Buddhists meditate in the grounds where they burn the dead bodies. Others seek out rituals where death is made real. We mostly hide from it. What I know is that when people get close to dying, it isn't scary to them as it is for us. If you can learn not to fear death, it means you have a choice. You can either live your life as reckless as you like, as if you will never die, or you can live your life as if this is a precious chance to give back, to be grateful for what you have received. The key is that fear and the gap of those decisions is parallel paralysis. Fear is paralysis. Wisdom is a lack of fear, especially in all things eternal. That isn't a quote, that is me talking to you. Fear is paralysis. Wisdom is a lack of fear, especially in all things eternal. So while we're at it, I feel compelled to add my own wisdom to the Hadza people, just to round it out because I can't help myself. I want to say to you, you must work to have a spiritual life. I say work because having a spiritual life isn't easy. Coming to church, praying, meditating, being in touch with your soul, it's a discipline. It requires you to make a commitment to being that person who cares about a spiritual life. David Foster Wallace, in his brilliant commencement speech entitled "This is Water," says this: 20 years after my own graduation, I have come gradually to understand that the liberal arts cliche about teaching you how to think is actually shorthand for a much deeper, more serious idea. Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and to choose how you construct meaning from experience. Because, he says, if you cannot exercise this kind of choice as an adult, you will be totally hosed. He's talking about having a spiritual life, having the discipline of mind and soul, to have some control over the choices we make, the choices of what we pay attention to and how we construct meaning. Having a spiritual life means discipline. My list also includes helping others when you can, looking for God, and learning what breaks your heart. What does that mean? The first is easy. You understand helping others. But listen to this. I say looking for God is looking for the highest ideals that guide your life and then ask you to pave a way through action. This isn't the God, the Father, or any type of concrete God you can imagine. It is the ground of your being that makes you into a good person. It means figuring out what you worship first. We don't sit in this sanctuary and worship a God that answers our prayers or smites our enemies. We worship a God that is beyond and within us, a God of many names that appears in the faces of our loved ones, in the faces of strangers, in the faces of the needs that call us. Knowing what you worship is important. It means you are looking for God, and getting to understand that is a clue. And the clue is understanding what breaks you open, what shatters your hope in humanity, what calls you to action. These are the clues that point to the holy. And I don't mean this in a romantic way. I mean, does a rapidly melting ice cap break you open? Does the fact that 1 in 3 children in Dallas is wondering where their next meal is coming from break you? Does a state legislature that wastes our money waging ideological wars against women or anyone, LGBT or T, break you? Does a bill in our own state that requires a pregnant teenager hoping for an abortion to appear before a judge in court, making her name and address public while she is wrestling with the most intimate and private choice of her life, does that break you? This bill passed this week. Is it possible that in those heartbreaks are the calls to action you need to see the divine? The question for today is, can you look for God in what breaks your heart? If you take any one task from today, one spiritual homework exercise, it is make a list of what is breaking your heart today and consider how you can act on it. You heard my list. Wisdom, my friends. It leads us to ask important questions of what is going on in our lives and in our world. And what better time than today? A day where we honor young people who are beginning their own lives. Wisdom, my friends, is important. Wisdom is intended to teach us about divinity and about virtue, 2 things we need more of in the world. I believe the church is here to hold up such wisdom. And because each of you who are committed to this faith are called to be representatives of Unitarian Universalism, to cultivate and act on wisdom, I hope this church is calling you into a deeper response in your life. For you graduates who are here in front of us, who are leaving us, I want to say that finding a UU church wherever you go is important. They need you, and you will need them. And encourage your parents not to give up on church just because you are gone. They need us more than they believe. So if this was a commencement address, I would send you out, wishing you all the best in your education or in the new life that you're about to lead. But it isn't. It's a sermon. So I say, bless you. Life is not easy. Let's get to work. Be a blessing. When I graduated high school, I went on an adventure to visit a Kenyan friend of mine in his village in Kenya. On the way, I stopped in London, and I remember standing outside of a pub. Yes, I spent a lot of time in pubs when I was that age. And outside there was a sign that said, "Take courage." It was an ad for a certain kind of beer. But it was a blessing. A blessing I carried every day of my life to act courageously, to be who I was, to go into the world boldly, to let my light shine. And so I say to you, friends, take courage and let your life shine wherever you go. Amen and amen. And we're going to sing now a hymn that you probably don't need the hymnal for, which is 118. This Little Light of Mine. If you grew up in the church, you probably know this one. Let's sing together. May your light shine as it does here with us, with these young people, each and every day. Go in peace, walk softly on your path. May God shine in you all the days of your life. Amen.